Hey everybody, welcome to the last video on KLIMA DAO. This is going to be a lot of kind of ramblings, a lot of speculation right out of the gate. This is not financial advice. If you make money, it's not because of me. If you lose money, it's not my fault. We're going to talk a lot about what I see in KLIMA's future, and in general, some heuristics for gauging when you should or should not buy Olympus or an Olympus fork, kind of how to value them properly. And then some other tidbits about bonding and dilution, and about toucan, base carbon tons, arbitrage, bridging, etc. Okay, so I think that I want to start with just laying out some bear and bull cases. So I have 3 bear cases and 4 bull cases lined out here, and I'm just going to go through each one, and we're going to talk through the numbers and different scenarios. Bear case number 1 I'll spend no time on, but smart contract risk. Bear case number 2, faith is completely lost in the team, and so there's no more buying. So I crunched these numbers a few days ago, and I'm just going to leave them as they are. The price of KLIMA is $115. There's 127 days left in the runway, right? So how many days could KLIMA pay out all of its rewards to all of its stakers before it ran out of treasury to back the new tokens with one carbon ton each? Basically, that means that if you have 1 KLIMA today, you will have 7.3 KLIMA by the time that it is gone. And then these are the assets that KLIMA has. So this is naked BCT, $34 million. This is KLIMA BCT liquidity pool pairs. That's $34 million. If KLIMA drops down to $5 each, then it would be worth $15 million due to impermanent loss. Again, I'm not going to go into impermanent loss in this video. You can look up what it is if you feel so inclined. And then there's BCT USDC, which is worth $42 million. Presumably there won't be significant impermanent loss there since there's no KLIMA. Okay, so at the end of the runway, we'll have 10.3 million KLIMA. Right now there's 1.4 million KLIMA in circulation. Multiply that by the 7.3x. That'll happen in the next 127 days. And then I removed about 10% because about 10% of KLIMA is belongs to the treasury, and so they wouldn't be paying out in a elastic or standing situation. They wouldn't be paying out the rewards to those KLIMA, so you can take it out of the equation. And then basically what we end up with is at the end of it all, there's about $10 worth of assets in the treasury per KLIMA once you fully dilute, which means about $70 per KLIMA, which means a profit loss of you lose 40%. So this is one of the most bearish cases I can come up with, but we do need to note that it doesn't account for any more KLIMA redemptions, and it doesn't account for losing more treasury assets via impermanent loss. So right here we lose about half to impermanent loss, but if we were to lose a significant portion and then the DAO decided that they wanted to get back to $34 million in pool pair here, then you could lose even a little bit more as it goes down. But in my mind, this isn't absolute. This is no more buying would happen starting today. And so these caveats kind of balance themselves out with the fact that we know we're talking about an absolute. To say, in reality, in a extreme case, but there's always going to be somebody who buys, but in an extreme case, we could maybe look at getting about minus 40% here if KLIMA just paid out all its rewards. Now, as of today, KLIMA ran up to $150, so your profit loss would be a lot higher than 39%. If you bought in today, it'd be more like 50%, but anyways, I think that gives you a pretty good illustration of kind of a max risk situation here. Okay, bear case number 3, the price goes to floor, but protocol limps along for 2x runway. So I did double the runway for simplicity of thought process here, but I'll get into more details. Basically, the thought here is KLIMA is totally not sustaining itself. It's like a candle that's getting burned down on both sides. But there's some buying, there's some activity, there's the occasional like bump up and stuff like that, and so we get this slow grinding down trend to death essentially, and we say that takes double the current runway. Okay. Basically what we would get is 254 days of runway, which means you'd have 53 KLIMA by the end, which means you'd have $270 by the end, so you have a profit loss of like 250%. That's mind-boggling. I really was trying to make this a bear case, and then it came out to more than double your money situation. KLIMA is just way oversold right now. It's trading way under like what I would call a healthy multiple for a protocol like this. So basically there's like so much fear that it's going to collapse, or that it's smart contract risk or whatever, that it's trading way below any reasonable multiple for like any reasonable amount of success for the protocol, in my opinion. But just to give you better numbers, maybe 200 days is when you would about break even. So again, there's 127 days in the runway. So if you get the runway and a half, that's when we're at break even. But yeah, so double the runway, you about double your money over the course of like a year. I mean, 2/3 of a year. Okay, let's go through these bull cases. The KLIMA price drops all the way to floor, but it survives for an entire year. So take that last case, add 100 days, and you have 3.5x to your money. Or add, 80 days or whatever. So that's pretty simple. I won't spend any more time on that. Bull case number 2, and these are in order of like more bullish. KLIMA price stabilizes at current real floor value over the next year. This is like, there's kind of layers of speculation here. So there's no reason for KLIMA to hold like a floor value of $35 per se. But if you look at the projections and what the protocol aims to do via bonding incentives and stuff, a year from now they should still be pretty high on the backing per KLIMA. And then it's after about a year and a half from now that you really start dropping down to like slowly over 5 years, getting down to the 1 BCT per KLIMA. 1 carbon time, I should say, because there's more than just BCT in the treasury. So take that with however much salt you want. Half it if you think that will end up being half, but it looked like we'll pretty much still be at about this real floor value. APY for a year, I've gone over this before, but it's 8,000%. That's because the current 25,000% APY will not last. In a few months we'll drop it down. When you aggregate those, you get to somewhere like around 6,000 to 10,000%. I was always calculating closer to 10,000. I saw something today that they might try and vote it in sooner, so it might be closer to 6,000. But anyways, with an APY of 8,000, you are looking at $2,800 from an investment of $115, or about a 25x return. Let's do it with 6,000. Only an 18x return. Still not too terrible. Okay. Bull case number 3. KLIMA moves similar to Ohm after Ohm's first nosedive. So basically, if you look at the Olympus chart, you had this first dive all the way down to 180, and then slowly, over several months, you got back up to 1,300, was their latest bull run. And if you look at the market caps, which is how you want to evaluate these, and I'll get into that in a minute, but if you look at the market caps, it started at 50 million and then ended at 4 billion, so that's an 80x. I went ahead and discounted that on both ends. So KLIMA is much more discovered than Olympus was when it was early. So I said, what if we, bottomed out, you take 100 million as the floor, and then KLIMA might not get as big as Olympus, right? It's a fork. Generally, they don't get as big as the original protocol, so that's half the ceiling. So if you did a similar movement, but halved on both ends, you end up with a 20x over about 5 months is how long that took to play out. So in that case, you'd be up about 2,000%. That's not exact. There's some fuzzy numbers, there's some dilution that could go on, stuff like that, but somewhere in that ballpark is what you'd be looking at for for that case. And then last bull case, KLIMA price stabilizes at 5x real floor value. I'd call this the real bull case, right? This is like how Olympus is still trading at $200 even after a huge rundown when it's supposed to be backed by $1. So let's say in a year we're still trading very high multiples of our backing, or rather of our like enforced backing. There's kind of the concept of how much stuff is there per token, which is the current backing, and then there's the enforced backing, which is like we will buy it back after it is under 1 carbon ton per token. Okay, so that means we would stabilize above the current price. We would get that APY of 6,000 or 8,000, and you're looking at about 100x on that. This is pretty wild. Let's see. Let's just do some numbers. So this is how many tokens we have right now, which would be 1.4 million. And then you take that and you multiply it by 80 for the APY. So that looks like a lot of tokens. Let's see here. Can I get one without the dots? Whatever, too much work. So 112 million tokens. And then if you multiply that times the backing price, you're talking about a market cap of $17 billion, which would be wonderful, and I don't think is totally unachievable based on like the carbon market if it was just like a huge success. But I'm not banking on anything like this kind of a return. I think that the KLIMA protocol is just too large to sustain these kind of multiples. Again, Olympus was a lot smaller at its smallest, 50 million. KLIMA's sitting at, well, let's look. A market cap of 200 million, right? And so like, there's the multiples, but there's also like the real associated size, which starts to get pretty hefty when you get into the billions for protocol. Okay, now that we've gone over those cases and you feel extremely bullish about KLIMA, let's learn some other fun facts before we wrap this up. You know, I feel like I should say the first time I bought KLIMA was at $1,200. So maybe let's just put that into some of these calculators and you can see some of my logic. I didn't know as much then as I knew now, full disclosure. But, boy, that sure isn't right. Yeah. So that's saying you would lose about 80% there if it limps along for 2x runway. Basically what I was doing for this case was this guy right here, where you say you lose a third, and I figured that the KLIMA price in a year wouldn't be at the floor. So I felt some FOMO. I wanted to get in on this project, and here I said we can go near the floor, like lose a lot of our value. APY is going to keep us up enough to break even. So I did my first buy there, and then I bought again at 600. Again on that similar thesis, right? I wasn't looking at like floor absolute bottoms. I don't think anybody was until we're down here. And then I bought more at about 300, and that's where this point is where I started telling my friends who are savvy and in crypto. I said, hey, this isn't just something I'm interested in. This is like, you gotta buy some. Like, the risk reward is really skewed here. And of course, now we're at 115, which is why we get such good numbers in our projections as long as KLIMA survives. Okay, let's talk about how you value an Olympus protocol. I kind of threw out these market cap numbers and showed how some certain percentages might be unsustainable. I really like, full shout out to Barrelhound on Twitter. Let me show his handle so you can follow him if you want. I thought this is a great analysis. I was chatting with him in Discord, and basically this is the Olympus chart up through the 4th of December. Okay, so we're missing quite a bit of down here. But he went and took all the peaks and all the troughs and looked at their market cap to treasury ratio, right? So like KLIMA is trading at a market cap of 200 million, and KLIMA has $120 million of stuff in their treasury. And so I did all those numbers and showed you all those numbers to show that you end up at like a 40% loss, right? If you take 120 million by 200 million, you basically get that same figure. So it's a really good way to show your risk and reward, because on the reward side, you say, okay, if the valuation goes back up to its highest multiple valuation, then how much money am I looking at making? Okay, so its first peak, you had a ratio of 7.5 to 1. So $20 million in the treasury, a market cap of $150 million. Then it had its nosedive. Right here is like the people not understanding that Olympus won't just die, that it has a backing, that it's not intrinsically worth zero. And it ran down hard, down to a ratio of 3 to 1, basically. So 15 million in its treasury and a market cap of 40 million. Now, it's interesting that the treasury went down because they discount their Olympus tokens. So I'm not actually sure how its treasury went down. Maybe this is all impermanent loss through its liquidity pair pools. That's probably what it is. Impermanent loss in the different pools. Anyways, ratio of 3 to 1. And then it goes up here, and you get a ratio of 6 or 7 to 1. And then you have a correction back down to a ratio of about 3 to 1. You'll notice they're not the same, but they're in the same ballpark. Once you get up to 6, 8, and once you get down to 3, there seems to be support. Then up here, you get up to 7.6 to 1 in this more aggressive run, right? It looks very aggressive, just like this one looks very aggressive as opposed to that. And then down here, you're at 3.6 to 1. I believe where it's at right now is like 2.3 to 1. So it did make a new low. But in general, it seems like it kind of you can look at these ratios, and it likes to sit between the 3 and 8 range, right? And like there's macro events and other things that might influence it one way or the other. One thing to keep in mind with Olympus is like it was on main chain. Now it's bridged a lot of things, but since it was on main chain, it was very expensive to make transactions. And so some of these highs you might see get higher because people don't want to pull their money out yet because it's too expensive to just be like going in and out flippantly. So you might get more defined charts in the case of Olympus. When you can get in and out easily, you might see less, more arbitrage, less pronounced peaks. But basically, I look at KLIMA, and at its high, it was trading of a ratio of like 18 to 1. I mean, it was like 15 million divided by 1 billion. Okay, yeah. Let's make that math. I did this backwards, huh? I can never for the life of me remember which way to do ratios. 66, okay. And that was because like the protocol was playing catch up even. But I think like the numbers I've heard thrown around were somewhere more in this ballpark, like 20, 25 to 1 market cap to treasury ratio. Ludicrous. And KLIMA had so much hype when it started. And it was so young, and like the protocol just didn't have time to like buy up the assets to back stuff and ever get more than like 1 BCT per token basically in the start. Like it was getting outrun by the buy pressure. Crazy. And currently we're at like 115 divided by 200. Oh my goodness. I also did it backwards again, huh? Like a 1.7. I mean, like trading extremely low multiples, right? Okay. Let's talk about KLIMA's price action just a little bit. This you're going to have a hard time finding out about if you go in the Discord. A lot of people don't like to talk about price action, especially when it sucks so much. I'm happy to talk about it. It's important. I am down a lot of money. Anybody who's bought into KLIMA is down money. It's been a straight downtrend since inception. And let's note the date here on the peak. on October 25th. And let's look at the Olympus chart. October 25th. So you can see KLIMA has actually been sympathizing really well to Olympus. I don't think Olympus is going anywhere. It's showed that it's not going anywhere, that it's got a team and a protocol that's going to survive. It can be less or more valuable, but it's not just going to fade out of existence. And that's really comforting for this KLIMA chart where you're like, is it just going to disappear? And you feel this kind of really exquisite fear or FUD around it. It's sympathizing with its parent protocol, which is exactly what you'd expect to do. Now, sympathizing at a stronger multiple. So let's look at G ohm. So this is racked staked ohm, and this means that you are accounting for the inflation in the price drop. So in that case, it went from a price of 30,000 to 13,000, 10,000. So it's down to about a third. In the case of KLIMA, we don't have as nice of a chart, but I'll show you what we do have. Let's see here. Index adjusted price. We go from 4,000, that's absolute peak. Again, this is just like manic. I would rather use 3,000. Generally, I'd say 3,000 at the top. I mean, this is like 2 days. It is up here. Anyways, down to about 500 right now. So you're looking at down to about a sixth instead of down to about a third. For a smaller protocol that you expect to be more volatile because it's newer, that was extremely overbought at the start, trading at ludicrous multiples higher than Ohm ever did. That doesn't seem too bad. That kind of seems sensible. When the reversal will be, how much longer we downtrend, who knows? But to me, it's to the point where everybody should buy a little bit if they believe the protocol will be around in a year. And yeah, that's it. I will give one more little note about dilution. I think it's important to understand that with all these rebase tokens, this is kind of a word of caution. You might think that your stack is just growing, but it's important to understand that even though the inflation isn't dilutionary, like the number of tokens grows, but you get the extra tokens, so like your percentage of tokens stays the same, your percentage of ownership in the DAO basically. That's not totally true because there is dilution via bonding. So I just came up with a pretty simple example. Let's say that you bought 100 KLIMA. For this example, we're just going to keep APY at 22,000%. So in a year, you'll have 22,000 KLIMA. And let's say that 6 months down the road, somebody bonds in 1,000 KLIMA, okay? What this means is that, like, I like to think of it as like the starting. So every minted KLIMA, it's kind of like the great-great-grandfather, right? And it has this family tree of KLIMA tokens that like come from it, from the APY. So you have one, and then you like end up with 20, and then you end up with 40, and then you end up with 80, just like, founding fathers, right? There's thousands of descendants of them or whatever. And when people bond, KLIMA mints like brand new tokens, right? That's not from the same family tree, like it's not from the same heritage. And so that new token is like totally new part of the protocol, and it dilutes the rest of them. Like the rest of them are just the family trees continuing, and there's still only 20 families in the protocol, even if there's more tokens. But now there's like a 21st family. And yeah, that family starts later, so it's a smaller piece of the protocol, but it does dilute you. Like you become 121st part of the protocol instead of 120th. So in this case, if somebody bonded in 1,000 KLIMA 6 months in, then they only get this APY of 22,000 for 6 months, which comes out to having 18 tokens per one. And what you end up with is like there's 40,000 tokens in circulation, right? So you're thinking like, dude, I'm chilling with this 100 KLIMA. Let's say that's all there was in the protocol, right? 100 families. Somebody comes in and bonds 1,000 6 months in, and you've been diluted by 50%, basically, in these numbers, which is like totally don't reflect reality. I was just trying to make a point. So understand that bonding does dilute you. That's not a bad thing. Bonding is the high APY is giving you like a bigger slice of the pie than you should get, right? That's why the runway, they're not just paying you back what you put in, they're like paying you what you put in and more. And it's this dilution from bonders that pays for that extra bonus that they can offer you. And so it balances out. And hopefully it actually balances out in your favor, especially when you get in at a good price or early on a protocol. But I just want everybody to be aware that you can be diluted out of these positions. Okay, wow, that video took longer than I expected. That is it for KLIMA. I will probably do updates every now and then. I'm not sure how much I want to follow the protocol and give updates, but there's always news coming out and new things to analyze and how it changes your fundamental perspective and analysis. So stay tuned to my YouTube channel, or I'll also try, I kind of suck at Twitter, but try and post announcements there when I'm going to record a new video and upload it. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please leave any questions in the comments, and I'd be more than happy to answer them.